Story 1. In February 2020, I was snowmobiling for the first time. My BF at the time was driving all day and finally let me drive at the end of the trip. We had been dating for 2 months, and this was our first trip together. I'm going around the last bend, and I accidentally floor the snowmobile instead of pushing the brake. I go flying off a cliff and end up 50 feet down. The snowmobile is on top of me, upside down, still running with the bottom part spinning. My helmet has flown off, and my head is 1 inch from a tree. I am terrified. My BF managed to roll off the back at the last minute and is trying to save me, but the snow is really deep, and he's having a hard time getting down the steep cliff. My legs are fully submerged in snow with the snowmobile on top, and I'm not sure if I'm paralyzed. He calls for help, and all these men run down to save me. When they finally pull me out, I can stand, and it's the happiest moment of my life. I'm not paralyzed. I don't have so much as a scratch on me. Do I have a concussion? Maybe it's hard to say. The snowmobile also miraculously has minimal damage. Only the little plastic windshield part is cracked. In hindsight, this moment is where everything changed for me, but you have to understand, I didn't piece this together and come to this realization until months later. These are the differences. There was suddenly a pandemic. Everything was shut down within a few days. In my old timeline, there was a virus going around, but it had only impacted a few people and was similar to a norovirus or flu, not big enough to be worried about. I had a different job. At the time, I chalked it up to the pandemic. We were on the trip because I was about to start a new job. I had signed the contract, and I knew what the role entailed. I was going to start the Monday after. But after the crash, I couldn't get a hold of my new boss for 9 months, and he finally told me I got the job in November, even though I had accepted it in February. He also comments how I've never been into the office when he gave me a tour in January 2020, and we spent the day together. The role I'm in is completely different than the papers I signed. My loving, awesome boyfriend was physically abusive for the first time that night. He got blacked out and attacked me, choking me. He was crying the next day, and nothing like this had ever happened before. I thought he was traumatized from the crash and let it go. That was another thing that was different. I would have never let that go before. I come from a loving childhood where my dad was my best friend always. I would have never put up with that before the crash, and was shocked I did. In the old timeline, I was on a low dose of Effexor, Xanax, and blood pressure medication. I don't take any medication at all this timeline. Over the next year, a series of weird things that don't make any sense keep happening to the point I start to feel suspicious. I all of a sudden have an incurable disease I didn't have before. I'm in pictures I have no idea what the context is. I'm wearing clothes I don't own anymore. My friends have memories of me I don't share, and I'm getting more and more depressed. BF keeps physically abusing me, and I can't get out of it. I have no will to save myself. I just keep thinking this can't be my life. This isn't my life. It just felt like I wasn't supposed to be here. And I finally look at Reddit and realize that I died in the snowmobile crash, and this is an alternative timeline I'm in. I start to just agree with friends when they say, "Remember when you said this as that, and we went here and did this," but I have no recollection. My CAT scans are normal at this point after visiting the ER. To be honest, I wasn't the most observant person to begin with. A new couch could be in the living room for days and I wouldn't notice. So when all the stores and shops are different in one area of town, I don't know if that was always there or new. I finally work up the nerve to tell my sister, who is surprisingly supportive. She asks what else is different. There was this song in the other timeline. It was a very popular song by a Shania Twain or Sheryl Crow type. Anyone would know it. I sing it to her with the lyrics, and tell her we always used to listen to it growing up. She has no recollection of it. I type the words into Google. The song doesn't exist here. The longer I'm in this timeline, the more I forget the words and melody of the old song. Also, there was no iPhone 13 in the other timeline because Steve Jobs was superstitious, and it was supposed to go from iPhone 12 to iPhone 14. I notice little glitches like that are stupid and don't matter. How do I feel about it now? I've accepted my new reality. I feel bad for my sister and parents in the old timeline that they're dealing with my death in a freak snowmobile accident. But there's nothing I can do. Trying to find them again would be like trying to walk from Canada to Australia with no map. Impossible and a waste of time. I'm just making my reality the best I can now. It clearly for some reason wasn't my time to die. I mean to the point of going to the afterlife if there is one. So I should do something important if I can. I was always agnostic before this, but didn't believe in different timelines. I thought movies like The Butterfly Effect and Run Lola Run were dumb concepts. Now I don't rule out anything ever. Story 2. This was just a few hours ago. I cannot stop thinking about it. The whole experience was extremely strange. My 2-year-old daughter was meant to be having her weekly custody night with her dad last night. Taking kids between parents' houses is currently permitted under COVID-19 restrictions. Usually she's fine with him, but he rang me at 1:30 a.m. saying that she was coming down with something and was very anxious and screaming for me. He stated he'd given her medication and done everything he could think of to calm her, but she just wanted me. It was clear he wasn't doing well, so I asked if he wanted me to come get her, and he said yes. He lives 10 miles away, so I wasn't very happy about having to go, but of course my daughter needed me, so I had a quick coffee and hopped in the car. A good portion of the route is pretty much on the highway, and I only remember seeing 2 cars on there as I got onto it. I presume key workers on a night shift. I usually get irritated by music in the car, but it was eerie, and I also wanted to keep myself awake, so just put on a generic top 40 station that was playing ads. As I got to my junction, I remember suddenly jolting and having this weird feeling of, wait, I'm here already. I remembered going onto the motorway and putting the radio on, and then suddenly it was time to pull off. Usually I'd have been on the motorway 10 minutes. You could just say that because nothing significant happened and I was tired, my brain just saw no reason to log the journey. But around halfway between my 2 junctions, there is a huge sewage plant right next to the motorway, and you can always smell it very strongly even if the windows are up. Usually on this route I know when I'm approaching it and hold my breath. Seemingly last night, though I just went past it without acknowledging it. Get to my ex's soon after and pick up my daughter. I have a coffee in his kitchen while he gets her stuff ready because I'm worried I'm too tired to drive safely and am regretting my decision to come and get her. My daughter is a lot calmer by the time I got there, but still very clingy towards me. We set off again. My daughter quickly fell asleep in the back and I had the radio on a low sound, but still intelligible. As I pulled onto the motorway again, the radio started going glitchy and static. I just kind of left it as it was, expecting it to pick up again soon. Suddenly it starts blaring Nirvana, and weirdly loudly as well. Obviously a top 40 station wouldn't be playing Nirvana in 2020, so I assumed it was just interference and a rock station had took over. Bit weird, but it happens. I kept it playing and didn't give it much thought, until the song ends and suddenly starts telling me the latest news headlines in Reno, Nevada. Some random American city I've never heard of. It definitely wasn't a UK-based station for Americans in the UK, or something like that. It was telling me local news and the clearly American presenter then started on a tangent about some event that had been canceled in the city due to COVID-19 and how disappointed his wife and kids were about it. I was dumbfounded and just carried on listening, wondering how the fuck this was possible and when it was going to cut out. Eventually I did, just as I was about to pull off the motorway again. It must have been on at least 5 minutes. After it cut out, the local top 40 came back pretty instantly. I've been home a few hours ago, and my daughter has thankfully slept well. I haven't. I read online radio stations can travel further at night and bounce off the atmosphere. But fucking Nevada? Why would I be hearing that in Stockport, England? Perhaps if it was a station in on the US East Coast it might have made a slight bit more sense. That way it would only have had to jump across the Atlantic and not the entire continental US as well. That, along with the weird time lapse, has definitely given me the feeling the atmosphere was not right on that motorway. I cannot stop thinking about it. Story 3. It's 3 a.m. here, and I just woke up. I am typing on my phone, so please excuse my formatting in advance. Anyways, I had fallen asleep next to my husband who stayed awake. He was mainly on his phone watching videos while holding me. About 5 minutes before I woke all the way up, I feel him get up out of bed and start rummaging around. I wake up when he turns on the light, and he says, "Hey babe, I'm about to walk to the store. Do you want anything?" And I tell him, yes, just a drink. You can take my green credit card. So he asks where my wallet is, and I tell him to look in my nightstand. So he turns off the light, because I'm squinting, and he turns on his phone's flashlight to light his way over to the nightstand. I am still laying on my side, but I'm awake. I hear him pick up my wallet. I can hear the change clinging around in the coin section in the middle. I hear the sound of him sliding my card out and placing the wallet back in my nightstand, and then I see him walk past me, in the direction of our room door, open and close it. As soon as the door closes, I feel his hand around my waist, and I about jumped out of my skin. Not only did I see him with my own eyes, walking past me and out the door, but I also heard his first few footsteps down the stairs at the exact moment that he closed the door. WTF. As I turned around and stared at him in horror, he said, "What's wrong, babe?" And I just shook my head. My heart was racing at this point. And then he asks me, "Hey babe, I'm about to walk to the store. Do you want anything?" And he gets up out of the bed, puts on the same clothes I saw him walk out in, and our conversation played out the same. Except, I'm sure my voice was quivering this time. I'm not sure what to make of this at all. My husband has about 10 different sweaters and jogger pants / sweats of his own, but he put on my burgundy sweater for the first time, and that's the same sweater I saw him walk out in. I'm so confused. Story 3. It happened in early 2000 when I was working at a juvenile detention center in a small town in Oklahoma as a corrections officer. I was working nights at the time and went to work at 9 p.m. This one night when I arrived for work, my supervisor looked confused and asked me what I was doing there. I said, "I work tonight." And he said, "But they said you called in a few hours ago saying that you were sick." I was a bit confused and said, "It must have been someone else and they got the message wrong." After everyone else showed up for work that night, it was a bit more weird, but we carried on as usual and assigned everyone their places for the night. I went to work in the control room where I usually work. The control room is the center of the prison that has direct control over the cameras, doors, phones, and everything. After I relieved the guard on duty and settled in for the night, I looked at the message that said I called in. It said that I had called at 6:50 and said that I had gotten sick while out cleaning up after the storm. There had been a storm the night before, and it was a bit bad, but not anything that I had to go out to clean up. It was truly weird. The supervisor came into the control about that time. He was also a friend of mine outside work, and we started talking about it, and how odd it was. I decided to call my wife at home and tell her about it while he was still sitting there. I picked up the phone and dialed. After 2 rings, a man picked up the phone and with a raspy voice said, "Hello." I did not know what to say for a few seconds. I looked at the phone to make sure I dialed the right number, and I had. After a few seconds, the person said, "Hello," again in the same raspy voice. I said, "Hello. Who is this?" "This is Taylor. Who is this?" the person said. My head started spinning because my name is Taylor also. I said in almost a scream, "Where is Ann?" He said, "Ann's in bed." "Who is this?" I dropped the phone and told my supervisor to ring me out. I had to get home, and I took off towards the door. I could hear Dave pick up the phone behind me and say hello, followed soon after by "What the fuck?" rather loudly. I ran to my car and drove home faster than what was legal, my mind racing the entire time. I busted through the door, and my wife was sitting watching TV and was shocked at me being home. I asked her who was there, and she said no one has been here. After a rather long talk with my wife, I went to call the prison to tell them what was going on, but the phone was dead. I went back to work, and when I came in, Dave was acting weird and asked me, "How the hell are you doing this?" He told me that when I left, he picked up the phone, and the person on the other end sounded like me. He kind of freaked out and hung up the phone. A minute later, as he could see my car leaving the parking lot, I had called back from home and asked what the F was going on. He said that I was a bit irate and said I was sick and did not feel like playing these games and was telling him to stop prank calling me, and hung up. After convincing him I had no idea what was going on, we went back to work. Later, I find out that the phone line for my area had been knocked down the night before by the storm. This is absolutely the strangest thing that has ever happened to me. Story 4. So random and bizarre, and I can't wrap my head around it. My husband made pizza rolls for our kids. I got them out of the oven and on plates. Each plate had 10 pizza rolls, and walked over to set my daughter's, who is 6 years old, plate on the table. She's autistic, mostly only relevant BC of her reaction, and was excitedly jumping up and down by the table, and I happened to stumble and 2 pizza rolls fell of the plate, falling towards her, so she reached out to catch them, and before our eyes they just vanished right before she caught them. Totally gone, not even in a blink. Eyes were wide open, and they just disappeared like a magic trick. I thought maybe they didn't actually fall off, and we both just panicked and thought they did, but there was only 8 on the plate now, so clearly they did. We stared at each other for a moment, and she said, "Wah? What?" I was speechless for a moment, then was like, okay, they couldn't have just disappeared. So we looked under the table, all over the room. Finally, I call my dogs and like, screw it. Even if they eat them, I just want them found. Nothing, and they would 100% find them if they were there, and they're not even sniffing around like food had recently been there. They're just gone. And my daughter is so pissed lol, enough that I made her a couple more lol, but WTF? I've never experienced something like that, at least not literally in front of my eyes, and the fact my daughter saw it too. She's literally still moving everything in the room around 20 minutes later because, well, how is that possible? She wants an explanation, but I've got nothing. Story 5. I know this sounds crazy, and trust me, I feel like I am going absolutely insane. But something has been going on with my best friend for months now, and it's been the most confusing experience. I stumbled across this subreddit last night and was hoping someone could explain what's happening. For backstory, me and my best friend Lily have known each other since kindergarten. We grew apart for a couple years during high school, but reconnected when we lived in the same dorm in college. We also lived together for the last 2 years of college. All of this is to say I really know Lily. I pride myself in how well I know her. We've spent several nights staying up until 5 a.m. talking about absolutely everything, and I cannot for the life of me understand what's going on. In February, Lily got really sick, and for a couple weeks we weren't sure if she was going to make it. I was absolutely worried sick and spent those weeks crying my eyes out, scared I would lose her. Long story short, she had emergency surgery, which saved her life. She got out of the hospital a week and a half later. Recovery was hard, but by late March, we were back to hanging out like normal. In early April, we were driving to the park, one of the only places we can go in quarantine, and listening to the radio when a song by her favorite band came on. I turned it up because we've sung this song in the car dozens of times before, but she immediately changed the station and said she hated that song. I asked what she was saying and reminded her how this was her favorite band all throughout her adolescence, but she just stared at me confused and said she had never heard of the band. I was obviously concerned by this and wondered if her surgery was causing her memory loss, so I brought it up to her parents, who were also extremely confused and said Lily had never talked about that band. Their posters covered her wall when she was younger. I remember it clear as day. There's no way all of them just forgot. A couple weeks later, she was sitting with my family and I outside when she asked me where my brother was. I told her I wasn't sure what she meant because my brother had died 3 years ago in a car accident. She got upset and accused me of tricking her, asking why I would lie about such a horrible thing. I repeated that he died and that she needed to stop because bringing him up out of the blue really upset all of us. It ended with her storming out of the house and us not talking for a couple days, until she called me to apologize. I insisted that he had died and said I would never lie about something like that, and she got really sad and started crying. That was the end of it. But just yesterday, the weirdest thing happened. I was out grocery shopping with her when we saw her ex-boyfriend. He was extremely abusive towards her, and my friends and I all despise him and try to keep him away from her as much as we can. When I saw him, I attempted to distract her from the situation and slyly lead her away, but she didn't seem fazed and looked in his direction, saying he was cute. She asked me if she should go up to him and ask him out, and I looked at her like she was absolutely crazy. I told her not to, not even bothering to bring up that he was her ex, because at this point she was starting to really scare me. I texted our mutual friends and asked if they remembered him, and they all did, so I know I'm not making it up. Usually, her ex would try to come up to her and intimidate her or come on to her or something, but he just walked by us and gave us that friendly stranger nod. I am so confused. I feel so crazy. Someone please help me make sense of this. Story 6. About 2 years ago, I was sitting in my living room with my partner and a good friend shooting the breeze, talking about all sorts of things trippy and mundane, when my friend starts to tell a story about a synchronicity that involved her brother. Basically, the story she was telling had to do with several people having a different memory from the presented truth. At the same time, we both yelled out, "It's like the Mandela effect." And at that moment, we both got a funny look on our face and grabbed our noses. They started tingling. We both started yelling, "Whoa, WTF." Then the room started to tilt from my point of view, as if I was watching through a screen that just got knocked over. My partner, a major skeptic of anything that can't be explained, sat there and watched the whole thing go down in shock. My friend, whose nose tingled, said, "Did the room just tilt?" Just like that, it went away, and everything returned to normal. As normal as things can get after that. I saw one post in here before that said they experienced nose tingles and what felt like their pineal gland activating when looking at checkered tile. Story 7. So I don't really know how to explain this, or if it even fits on this sub, or even what actually happened if I'm being honest. But regardless, I will try to relay the story. I was driving to work this morning, and I'm coming up a side street that connects to a very busy road in my area. It's the main road that stretches through like 20 towns. I get to the red light at this main road and sit there for about 15 seconds before seeing a car pull up behind me. As the car comes to a complete stop behind me, my eyes drift from the rearview mirror to the stop light in front of me. It was red still. I then look down to my radio clock and it says 7:36, and this is going to sound strange, but for a period of time that seemed to stretch on until infinity, I kind of felt like this intense pressure all around me, like I was zoned out and couldn't clear my head or move my body because I was obsessed with the numbers I was seeing, like I was in a trance or something, and it wasn't silent around me, but it was at the same time, like very, very loud, pressing silence. I couldn't move, but I also wasn't trying to move, almost like I was paralyzed with fear and knew I was frozen, but couldn't really process it or try to move. I really can't explain it. Even now it's so confusing to me. After who knows how long of being stuck in this trance, suddenly everything snaps back to normal. Instantly. The very first thing I register is that the person behind me is laying on their horn. I look up and see the light is green. I begin to drive forward, feeling completely 100% normal again, and once I get into the middle of the intersection, I sense this large presence to the right, left, of me. I turn my head to look out my driver's side window, just in time to see a huge truck coming right at me. It hits me and I could feel my body break. I felt and heard so many of my bones get absolutely crushed. Suddenly I'm upside down in my car, in so much pain I can hardly breathe, covered in glass, and I can hear someone screaming. The last thing I remember before I passed out about 10 seconds later was seeing cop lights and distinctly thinking to myself, wow, how did they get here so fast? This is important. The next thing I remember, I open my eyes and I'm sitting in my car at the red light. The intense pain I felt a moment ago is fading fast, but it's still there, only almost like a ghost version of itself, if that makes sense. I'm intensely confused at this point, and I start looking around in a panicky way, and my eyes trail across the clock again. It says 7:36, and I'm beyond confused. I know it wasn't a daydream. It was so goddamn real. I'm frozen in place staring at the clock trying to figure out what the fuck just happened. After about 5 to 10 seconds, I hear the person behind me start to beep at me, but I'm shaking and about to cry and so overwhelmed with leftover fear that I can't even react to it. They start to lay on their horn, and I still can't move because I'm just so confused and frightened. Now at this point I was starting to calm myself down and trying to rationalize what happened. I was beginning to convince myself that it had to have just been a daydream. It was early enough and I was tired enough that I even started to think I just nodded off at the red light and dreamed the crash. What the hell else could have happened, right? If it weren't for what happened next, I probably would have been able to go the rest of my life believing I had fallen asleep and dreamed it. The moment the clock turned 7:37, like the very second the numbers changed, a huge truck comes barreling through the light, definitely speeding. They ran their red light and crossed right in front of my car. A few seconds later, a cop, who must have just been driving behind the truck in the first place, runs the red light as well, turning on his lights in the process and beginning to pursue the speeding truck. They both drove out of my view within a few seconds. I was so shaken I just pulled my car to the side of the road, right where I was, and sat there in silence for I don't even know how long. Like, what normal explanation could I possibly come up with for this? There isn't one. I hadn't seen the truck or the cop car before they ran the light in front of me. So how did the dream crash I had include those very specific and very real details? The entire area I live in is covered in trees, so it's not like I can see very far down the road in either direction. I know for a fact I did not see the truck or the cop car before I experienced the crash. I'm still so shaken. How do I rationalize this experience to myself? I feel disillusioned by something, but I don't even know what. I feel like I'm going crazy. I needed to share this with people who won't automatically dismiss this as a hallucination or a dream. Story 8. Yesterday, I was swimming at my local lake. I put my stuff near the water and went in. When I looked back after about 5 to 10 minutes of swimming and diving, I saw that a young couple sat next to my stuff. I kind of felt weird about them. They had this super weird aura. They both were about 20 years old. I remember the towels they sat on, one being red and the other gray. Then I lost my swimming goggles. They fell down to the lake floor. I dived down about 3 meters and came back up, which lasted about 5 to 10 seconds. When I looked at the couple again, because all the time I felt weird about them, they both were really old. They definitely retired. I thought maybe the young couple went home, and the elders came to sit there. However, the young couple was nowhere. There were around 10 people in a 50 m radius, and the towels were the same. At first I thought it was a visual glitch, but after I was walking by, I heard that their voices changed as well. Story 9. This was probably over 8 years ago. This'll be long, but I just wanted to get this out there. I worked at a sewing factory, and I didn't have an iPod or a good phone, so I would just listen to the crappy local radio with my earbuds while I sewed, and always paid attention when the obituaries came on. I live in a small town, and was just bored and curious if I might know anyone. This particular day I wasn't paying much attention, and took a bathroom break. When I was in the single bathroom, I realized they were already announcing, and paid attention. I caught the last name Worth, and that the person had worked for NASA and RCA. I thought that was odd because that's pretty unique for someone around here, and my dad's uncle, who we called Uncle Dan, worked for those places a long time ago. Then I was trying to recall the name, and then I thought they said Daniel Worth. So then I felt shocked because I didn't know if my uncle's name was Daniel, and that was why too much of a coincidence. When I got home I told my boyfriend that I thought my uncle died, and this doesn't have much to do with this, but it was an odd added fact that he had also gotten news that an uncle of his died that day. Anyway, I called my dad to ask if Uncle Dan was okay, because I thought I heard his obituary. So he called around, and I guess through the grapevine he heard that another uncle just talked to him the other day, so he called back and said he was fine. So 7 days later my dad called me, and when I answered he just said my name and I knew. Then I just started crying as he told me. Someone happened to stop by his house and noticed a strong odor and didn't get a response. He was a total hermit and was always home. Cops ended up finding him, and they ended up estimating he had been dead for about 7 days. Just a little bit about him and how I felt about him for context. I only saw him a handful of times throughout my life, but he was my favorite uncle because he seemed so interesting and mysterious. He looked like a wizard with a long white beard, and his house was half underground like a hobbit house. He never really left home, and he would just sit and chain smoke and had long fingernails. I always thought he didn't seem sad, but his house was small and the walls and floor were concrete, like he was in a little dungeon. I really felt for him. My dad told me that a long time ago when my dad was growing up, Uncle Dan was married to a lady named Dorothy, Aunt Dottie, and they were the happiest, in love, outgoing couple. Sadly, she ended up passing away, and that's when Uncle Dab made himself his little wizard house. So back to why I think he died. When my family and I were going through his stuff, I found a box of cassettes. I looked through them and found a tape with meditation written on it. I didn't say anything and just borrowed it to check out alone. When I listened to the tape, it was him talking to himself, saying, "You don't need your medication," and just telling himself everything is fine. He was on a lot of medication, especially for his heart. The saddest/sweetest thing I ever heard was at the end of the tape. He sang a song to Dottie, and it was so hauntingly beautiful. After all of this, I felt really good, like he was letting me know he now knew that he was always my favorite uncle by letting me know first that he had passed and letting me find the tape.